Hey guys, today I'm going to talk to you about the difference between exchange traded funds and mutual funds and which you should purchase. So, what are exchange traded funds and what are mutual funds? Well, basically, it's funds that buy a large selection of stocks or bonds or certain types of financial instruments, usually bonds or stocks or a combination. And instead of you having to buy them all selectively by yourself, the money is all pooled together. So you can just buy a chunk of that pool instead of having to buy each stock individually, which maybe you can't even afford to do. And the purpose of this is for diversification purposes, which reduces the risk or volatility of your portfolio. In other words, the price won't swing up and down as much as if you buy individual stocks. It's also a protection against not really knowing what you're doing in case you buy bad stocks or bad bonds. Diversification protects you from that. So it's a way of not putting all your eggs in one basket and a much safer way to invest. So what's the difference between exchange traded funds and mutual funds? Well, the basic differences are that mutual funds are actively managed, whereas exchange traded funds are not actively managed. So exchange traded funds usually are comprised of a bunch of stocks or bonds or real estate properties or things like that represent a certain market. So for instance, the S&P 500 is a collection of companies that generally reflects the overall performance of the American economy. And generally it goes up. It goes up and down over time. There's some volatility, but overall it goes up. The same thing can be true of, let's say, a corporate bond ETF. Mutual funds, on the other hand, and ETFs are passively managed, which means they just buy the same things over and over again. Mutual funds, on the other hand, are actively managed. So they'll have particular goals, like, for instance, let's say Canadian stocks. They only buy Canadian stocks, but managers will selectively avoid certain stocks, get in and out of certain stocks, and more actively manage the portfolio rather than just buying the same thing over and over again year in and year out. So the main difference between ETFs and mutual funds, because of the way they're managed, whereas ETFs are passive and mutual funds are active, is that ETFs have a much lower management fee and mutual funds have a higher management fee. ETFs usually have a management fee lower than 1%, usually around, as low as 0.15% or 0.1%, whereas mutual funds are usually between 1 and 3%, so it's much higher. So the bottom line, which usually does better? And the truth is that ETFs usually outperform mutual funds. The majority of ETFs outperform mutual funds. They're similar type. If you take a ETF of the S&P 500 versus an actively managed mutual fund of American stocks, chances are that the ETF will do better. This isn't always the case. So the problem with mutual funds is that because they're selecting stocks and actually managing, what really is going to make the difference is in the analyst's ability to choose and get in and out of stocks. So really, unless you know the analyst, or unless you really know the fund, or unless you really know what's in the fund, you can't really tell if it's going to be good or not. So chances are the ETF is going to be the better choice. And if you actually can tell if a fund is better or not by analyzing the fund, then chances are you don't even need to buy into a fund. You can make your own portfolio, unless you really don't want to do that, which would probably be dumb because figuring out which mutual fund is good and bad takes as much effort as just making your own fund. So bottom line, ETFs usually outperform mutual funds for two reasons. The first being because of the higher management fees, and the second reason, one that I personally think that's too complicated and I'm not going to get into. So if you have any questions about financial related topics, where to invest, where not to invest, what certain financial concepts mean, things like that, feel free to ask, feel free to post it in the comments, feel free to post it on my Facebook or something like that. And I hope this helped inform you if you ever have to, or if you currently are making a decision whether to buy exchange traded funds or mutual funds. Thanks a lot, and see you soon. Bye.